Rosemary, thank you so much for doing this interview with me. I got to say, thank you for what you did for me a month ago when we were talking about Kwanzaa, and you taught me a lot and everything. I got a lot of great reaction on that. A lot of people really enjoyed it. It was such a learning aspect. So I want to say right off the top, thank you so much for that. And also, I can still say this: Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. And thank you so much, Rudy, for having me on your show. I love being able to talk about African Canadian history and African Canadian stuff because if we don't do it, who's going to do it for us, you know?
Exactly, which is why we're going to talk about Black History Month here in Canada. You are truly the architect to help make this happen. And I know we talked about it before, but I know I'm going to say it again because when I was growing up, um, there's no such thing as Black History Month. You know, it was never taught in school. The only time I ever learned anything was if my dad woke me up in the late at night to watch a documentary on television of the civil rights movement and things like that, or if the Special Roots was on. Other than that, other than maybe seeing my heroes like Muhammad Ali or speeches from Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, it was very limited. It wasn't until the 90s where I had to go out and learn myself and try to find books. And but to know that you helped bring this in where now it's being taught in schools, I think is amazing. Congratulations on that.
Well, thank you so much, Rudy. And let me also just say that I was that kid too. You said that your dad would wake you up in the middle of the night to see programs. Representation of Black people was so sparse that if we saw somebody in a commercial for a fleeting second, we would call up our friends and say, "Did you see that?" If we saw, a Black person doing something other than, the Hattie McDaniels being the role of the servant who was overly concerned about pleasing her white employers or overseers. I mean, if we saw anything more than that, we were just so thrilled because it was just so scarce. In the regular reading material, Black people weren't even mentioned in the newspapers and in the regular magazines. It was only if we got American stuff, as you point out, like Ebony magazine,
Yep.
we saw Black people. It's like, whoa. And my own lived experience told me we were here. So, what you're saying, that isn't just your story. It isn't just my story. It's our story. And that's why something that would cover all of us needed to be done so that we could all feel like, yes, we're here. And yes, we've done something. And yes, everybody should be aware of that. So when it came to Black History Month, um, I can't take credit for being the person who made it happen, but I am the person who made it happen. So let me explain that.
Yes, please, please.
When in 1978 there was an organization called the um, Ontario Black History Society that was founded by Dr. Daniel G. Hill, Wilson O. Brooks, Joan Kazmarsky, Lorraine Hubbard, Donna Hill, and somebody else who I'm blanking on. They made it their first order of business to petition the city of Toronto to have February as Black History Month in the city of Toronto. And that was in 1979. However, by the time I became the president in 1993, what had happened is that, and there was a change of the staff person in the office. I didn't know, no one knew that we were supposed to go to the city every year by a particular deadline and say, please, can we have the proclamation? So here I am. I'm an at home mom with my third child, still nursing, no idea about this requirement. And I was petrified that we were going to miss out on having the opportunity. So I went to the city, got the proclamation, even though it was past the deadline, we won't tell anybody. And then I realized how um, sensitive it was. We could miss out on having Black History Month because of an administrative error in our office. Because essentially the OBHS was the keeper of Black history, even though it had been celebrated within the Black community by the Canadian Negro Women's Association in the 1950s. But that was informal. with the Black community. First one being organized by the Canadian Negro Women's Association, and the first host was Judge Stan. He wasn't Judge then, but Stanley G. Grizel. So by the 1970s, it was now this everybody event. We wanted everybody to know. 1993, 94, got the first proclamation. And I realized, you know what? I'm going to get this with the province. And I did. Even though years later they redid it because it wasn't a super official bill, it was something else. It was a bit more temporary. But I didn't worry about that at the time, nor did I know about it at the time. I got one from every province in the country. And then, and in the meantime, of course, having all kinds of events, going into schools and giving literally hundreds of presentations, having a Black History Month brunch, building on the usual activities of the OBHS. I also approached many people in the federal government, and nobody was agreeing to do this. I was at a fundraiser for a politician at Denham Jolly's house, and Gene Augustine was there. And so it's like, hi, Steve. Did you see, did you, well, not quite like that, but did you know that I've been working on having this as a national? Would you consider it? And at that point, she sort of gave me the green light that she was going to push it through or try to get it through. So December 1995, it went through. February 1996, it's finally passed, and it was finally celebrated. And I was the only non-elected representative on the platform with the Black caucus. Me, Jean Augustine, Prime Minister of Canada, Jean Chrétien, Ovid Jackson, Hetty Fry. That was it at the time. And Sheila Cox is an honorary Black person.
that just you saying that is such an eye opener, because when I think about that point in time, there was a shift. There was a Black awakeness happening then, especially down in the States. You saw it on television, you saw it in the films and movies. Do you think that awakening helped shift things? And also, and you don't have to give names, were there any politicians who were trying to push back? You kind of talked about that, kind of like, well, I don't know. But were any like what we see right now in the U.S., where literally there are politicians who are saying, we don't want Black history taught in schools? Did we have anything like that then?
In terms of the declaration for February as Black History Month, it went through, I believe, unanimously.
That's good.
So officially, there was no opposition. But in practice, what was really happening? And I think that's where the hiccup is. It's sort of like when we talk about the story of the Underground Railroad, it makes it seem like there was no slavery in Canada when you focus on the Underground Railroad. I think that when you focus on the fact that everybody was okay with Black History Month, but then what were they going to do about it?
Yeah.
So was there a required Black History Month effected in every school board, even though that's a provincial responsibility? Was there any federal push to see that happen? Was there a change in terms of how people did their hiring? Did they give greater attention and consideration to non-traditional or shall I say racialized candidates? Was there a sudden shift so that now even the organization I headed was going to get funding, or I was going to make, like, nothing? In a particular sense, nothing changed except we had Black History Month. And so when you look at it that way, I think it even adds to the significance of having it, because if there was no nice expectation that we look at February as a time to study and consider the contributions, achievements, and experiences of people of African descent. It wouldn't have happened at all.
Hmm.
So now this was like a foot in the door to basically begin a process, and that process continues because, as you know, Rudy, um, Black history may be taught in Black History Month, but it's not required. Nobody has to study Black history in order to graduate from any grade. There is no curriculum requirement making it required, necessary for somebody to study Black history. There is no course of study that is there for from kindergarten to grade 12 where anyone has to take Black history. And the fact that we might have some Black history courses that have emerged in high school is nice, but they're often not among the required courses for graduation. And you have to think, if you've been told you don't count, you are not here, your story is not important from K to grade 11, where do you put your attention and how do you feel about considering maybe taking an American history course in grade 12 that might have to do with Black people? It's very complicated.
It is because and that frustrates me because why would say somebody like I don't know, somebody who is white in history who did something more important to say somebody who is black who's done something, and more importantly too, Canadian black. We don't hear enough of the accomplishments that have happened in Canada. And to me, that is just so frustrating. I love what's going on with, I just spoke with him, Dwayne D.O. Gibson, and he's doing a tour across Canada about basically teaching about black history and talking about the things that have gone on, just talking to the kids. But, it's, to me, it's so frustrating because if I went to anybody, black or white or whatever, and asked somebody what has, tell me of accomplishment of a black Canadian, if they're not going to say something about music, they're going to say maybe something about sports. Might say something about politicians, but it's a rarity.
Well, I think, you've hit the nail on the head, Rudy. When we talk about Black people, there's this idea that there are no Black people in Canada. And there's another idea that if there are Black people in Canada, they only came recently. And then there's another idea that most people assume that the Black people have made no contribution to this country really
Yeah.
whatsoever. And so we have like three very critically and challenging, difficult messages to counter just by saying we're Black Canadian. The powerful influence of the United States culturally, it doesn't just affect Black people, but it truly has some really challenging impacts here because that voice is so very loud, and that almost sets a standard that can't possibly be met here. Just because we don't have the same numbers of people, of course, our experience is going to be different. Just because we didn't have the same weather, of course, our experiences are going to be different. We didn't have, while we also have emerged as a country built on the backs of enslaved people, First Nations and African, because we don't have like large plantations. Our deep south is southern Ontario. We don't have large plantations. So it's hard for people to get their heads around the idea that we had slavery. We don't have what people are remembering in terms of race riots, although the first race riot in North America took place in Shelburne, Birchtown, Nova Scotia, a huge one. So, it's because people don't know. And as long as they don't know, they think because they don't know, therefore it didn't happen. We have had segregation here. We have had race riots here. We have had lynchings here. We have had challenges to immigration that didn't just happen in 1967 or 19, last week. We've had challenges to immigration that started in the early 1900s, if not before. So we are really very much the same. It's just a matter of understanding that there's a nuance to African Canadian history that's different. We have resistance here too, but our resistance may not look exactly the same as it looked in Jamaica because this is a different country with different numbers and different situations impacting how people can act and do.
So what so what do we do now to help change that as we go forward? Yes, I can go to a library right now and they're going to have somewhere a section where it's going to be Black History Month. They're going to have pictures up and, information and things like that. And for I understand, yes, there are some schools that actually are teaching Black History Month, but just February. As you said, why isn't this being taught year round? And also, too, and I said this too when I interviewed D.L. Gibson, I mean, and I wore it today. I have on my Malcolm X shirt today for this interview. I'd like to have a Canadian black leader as a shirt or something like that, and I can't find something like that.
And that shirt, who could it be? It could be Rocky Jones.
Yes.
It could be, oh gosh, so many people. It could be Dudley Laws. I mean, it
And that's
depends.
what I was thinking of. Dudley Laws would be my first person I would wear a shirt.
I like Rocky Jones because at the time he was very much compared to um, Stokely Carmichael in the day, but Dudley Laws too. I mean, as much as some people oppose him, if you look at his messages, they were generally to the improvement of situations that negatively impacted Black people. People may not have liked his methods, but what were his messages?
But they said the same thing about Malcolm. The exact same thing.
I think even something like last week was Lincoln Alexander Day, and I was certainly part of the process to see this commemorated provincially and nationally. Yet nobody really celebrates it. This is the first. I mean, I've approached everything I have done in a nonpartisan way. So I'm not there because of his politics. I am there because of the significance of the role that he held, in particular, as the first African Canadian vice regal in this country. It took until he was in that position in order to be lieutenant governor. This is something to be celebrated. But people don't even know who he is, and they'll go out of their way to celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. Day, which is important. He is also not to say he's not important, but if we're talking about who are the African Canadians, here is one, the only Black person in Canada to have a national day named after them, and nobody does anything much about it.
It's true. And in fact, I don't think I saw anything. I saw things on social media. I didn't see anything in the papers. I don't think I saw anything on the newscast for what I watched. So no, that's very significant. So if you could have that magic wand and we can wave it, what would you like to see happen? Schools, colleges, wherever, and how things to be taught, or how would it work? Because like I said, I can't see why it just can't Black history just can't be taught like he said, just regular information that is taught to kids.
It can be taught, and it's people like here's one way that it can be taught. Ooh, there. I don't know if that's clear for you.
Right. Oh, back up a little bit, right there.
There. Okay. This is an award-winning Canadian book, a Canadian bestseller, the kids' book of Black Canadian history.
Okay, that just phased out, but I have that book though. I know exactly what you're talking about.
And you can still get that. It's in the libraries. It's a great general overview read if people want a quick update on what is Black history in this country and who are some of the people that are important. This is another one. This is maybe better for grade 8, high school age. Black history, Africa, the Caribbean, and the Americas by Buddy Day Learning Institute in out of Nova Scotia, but it covers the country. This is one that people think they know about,
Yep.
but Harriet Tubman lived in Canada for 8 years, and she conducted, um, the actual rescue missions, starting from St. Catharines, Ontario, going into the States and coming back here. And this person, Marianne Shadd, she is the first Black woman publisher in North America. This is important. This is critical. And for people who are really into poetry, this is an amazing book I've just been going through. And it touches on what is Blackness in so many different ways. I think that you'll really enjoy it. It has poets and short articles from across the country, and it was edited by A. Gregory Frankson. So those are some books that I would suggest and I have on hand. I think part of it is about self-learning and
Yes.
doing some of the research yourself, but I think it's also pushing whomever you can push to make sure that our kids are learning this. Your principals, your teachers, your trustee. These are the people who have significant influence in terms of education. And if you're comfortable, go to the MPP to make sure that they know that you want to see these kinds of information facts included in what we provide to our children.
Yeah, before we wrap this up, I know there are going to be a lot of events, whether it be in person, if we can, or virtually. But something we talked about a little bit earlier uh, in our last interview that happens year round, and that's the Underground Railroad tour that they have. Can you talk a little bit about that, please? Because I think if there's any experience that's eye opening, it's that one.
Well, I there's a few tours around, and so I can't be sure that I'm going to be able to comment on that one. I've certainly received a number of awards internationally for some of the tours I've done. I've done tours, walking tours of Black history in Toronto, as well as Southern Ontario. And there are other people who are doing tours as well, usually generally in Southern Ontario, in part because some of the um, urbanization hasn't negatively affected rural Ontario. Some of the buildings were ignored, and in the process of being ignored, they still are there for us to go and enjoy. So going to a place like Buxton, North Buxton, Ontario, which was an all Black community, somewhat close to Chatham, Ontario, you can actually see the what had been the schoolhouse, what had been the church, what is still actually the church, as well as a museum there, for example. And I think it's, as much as we were to go back to something that we said earlier, it's really important for all of us to remember that there was a point in time when a place like Windsor or Chatham had 30% of their population as Black. So it wasn't just these, you know, somewhat off the beaten path settlements of Hughes and Tilsonburg and Buxton that were perhaps all Black. Other cities that you are aware of had very significant populations of Black people. And I think that it behooves us all to find out more about them. There were even Black communities that were where people basically had intermarried and over years were fearful that people would find out that they had Black ancestry. So it's a complicated history, but it's throughout this province.
How do people get in touch with you? Because if there's anybody, like I said, love talking as a historian, it's you. How do folks get in touch with you?
Email is a great way. I'm on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, but my email is my name, rosemary.sadlier, Sadlier at gmail.com.
Rosemary, again, thank you so much for doing this interview with me. Um, I always learn so much from you, and I hope we can continue talking about this because, like I said, you're an amazing person, and thank you so much for helping bring Black History Month in Canada for fruition. Because if not that, this would be a really sad world. Thank you so much for doing what you've done.
Thank you. And thank you so much for doing what you do, Rudy. It's so important for us to share these kinds of conversations with people. Thank you.